Survivors play a critical role in the change needed to end violence against women and their children. Some want to share their stories in the media, so their lived experience and expertise can contribute to the public conversation, while others may not. Here's some tips you can use when interviewing survivors. When reporting on violence, remember that the survivors have been through trauma. The way that you treat them and share their story may impact on their healing.
If you are going to be reporting regularly on sexual violence, I just implore you to undertake training of trauma-informed practices to ensure that the entire process, from the interviewing to the writing and then to the support, is trauma-informed and victim-centred, to ensure as far as possible that the individual is not being re-traumatised.
A lot of people with disabilities have not just trauma from, possibly experiencing violence, but also trauma from trying to access a system that is not built for us. So having that trauma-informed lens, I think, is really important when it comes to reporting on these issues.
Before an incident happens, build relationships and trust.
Given the 24-hour news cycle, journalists quickly want to find case studies, right? And they're up against the clock. They've got a lot of pressure on them. When they're trying to find case studies, it's hard for impacted communities to trust certain segments of the media. If that trust is not there, you're unlikely to get someone to come on camera. So it is about recognising that you need to put in the work, develop those relationships with impacted communities, try and understand them in a nuanced way. And that's not going to happen, 4 to 5 when you're calling people going, can you do X, Y, Z by this time? It does require having these conversations beforehand, nurturing those relationships, developing trust, and then, seeking to provide nuanced coverage.
When a story breaks, avoid approaching survivors or their families in the immediate aftermath of an incident. At that time, they are still in shock and may be unable to fully comprehend what they are consenting to by speaking to you. Respect their right not to talk.
In the aftermath of violence, you need to be supported. You need to be wrapped in care. You need to be offered whatever it is that you feel you need in that moment by your family, by your friends, by service providers. You do not need to be harassed to tell a story that you may not be in a position to tell yourself at that point, right? You're still processing it. That is probably where we need to do our homework as journalists, right? Do our homework about what trauma looks like and appreciate what it is that victims are holding in that moment. And is your ask too great at that point? And I think if your heart tells you that that's the wrong thing to do, then don't do it. Be guided by your gut.
We in the media have a tremendous responsibility to get it right. There is a real clashing point here between, understanding trauma and also that ever present crunch of deadlines, which is a delicate dance at any time, but particularly when trauma is included. But it's where I think that a go slow or go slower approach is better.
Before the interview, be aware of the power imbalance between you and the survivor, and seek to provide them with as much control over the process as possible.
Journalists should know that victims, survivors have experienced profound trauma. And for us to tell our stories, we need compassion and empathy. We may have been silenced or ignored or not believed. So for some of us, we can sense that there's a power difference between media and us when we go into that interview. So it's important that when we're working with media that we don't feel like that's getting replicated, because then that does not feel safe for us to interview.
Get full and informed consent from victim survivors before telling their story. Explain the risks, including identification, retribution, public backlash, and online abuse they may experience.
A lot of it for me comes back to informed consent and informed choice. So if you have a survivor who wants to speak out as a case study, that you need to make sure that you have informed them of what those risks actually are, and to make sure that they're making a well-informed decision to publicly disclose. You might be talking to them about their options to remain anonymous, to have key details redacted from their case study so they can still speak out, while minimising the potential for those negative ramifications.
Allow survivors to choose the interview location and bring a support person.
Work with us around what do we need to feel safe? Where do we want to do the interview? Do we want to do that at our kitchen table, or do we prefer to sit in the park? What do we need accommodation-wise around disability? Do we want to remain anonymous? What photo do we want? And do we want a support person there with us as well?
Suggest they have a plan for the day the story is published.
I often talk about having a plan for the day when the story comes out. Where are you going to be? Who are you going to be with? Is there anything that you can do to mark the day nicely for yourself as a celebration? So we actually do that planning with the person.
During the interview, give survivors as much time as possible to tell their story.
For me, it's often or always about the deep listening and thinking and understanding, and being really considered in the way that I frame questions, to not put people on the spot in those circumstances, but to give them the space to unlock their own story.
Earlier on in my career, I was actually disciplined because I was doing an interview with a survivor of workplace sexual harassment. And as she disclosed, I said, "I'm so sorry that has happened to you." And someone higher up said I was editorialising by saying that, and that I wasn't maintaining my objectivity as a journalist because I was acknowledging and accepting their version uncritically. And I always remember thinking that had I sat there totally wooden, this person wouldn't have felt safe to keep going. Sometimes what journalists are taught to do is not necessarily what survivors are needing or looking for in that moment.
After the interview, be transparent about what will happen after the interview. Keep survivors informed of when their story will go live, and assist them in preparing for media attention.
We're humans. We will have emotions when you interview us. And those emotions don't just surface when we're being interviewed. They can also land after a piece goes live as well. So give some consideration to checking in with the person that you've interviewed afterwards, just to see how they might be feeling after they've seen their story go live.
I often think when I'm writing something, what would Auntie think of this? I can remember one of my proudest moments was doing a poster with an elder and talking to our experiences of violence and how it feels for an Aboriginal woman to leave their violent circumstances. And we put this poster together, we got it printed, we were ready to launch it. I put it in front of Auntie Faye, and Auntie Faye was in tears. And my response to that was, "Have I got it wrong, Auntie Faye? We'll pull it, we won't launch, we won't go forward." Auntie Faye's response to me was, "These are good tears, Kyllie. You have captured what our women experience."
Working with survivors and hearing their stories can lead to vicarious trauma for reporters. Make sure you seek help where needed to support yourself and your colleagues. For more information on interviewing survivors, visit ourwatch.org.au.